He understood something most rulers never learn. That power is not taken with armies alone. It is taken in the minds of the people, long before the first sword is ever drawn. He was a man drowning in debt who behaved like the richest man in Rome, a general who wrote his own legend and made an entire republic believe it, a conqueror who learned that forgiving your enemies can be more powerful than destroying them. He climbed higher than any Roman before him. He bent the most powerful nation on earth to his will, until, at the very peak, he made one fatal mistake. He began to believe he was untouchable. And that single belief got him killed by the men standing closest to him. This is the dark psychology of Julius Caesar. He was born around the year 100 BC into an older noble Roman family, a family with a proud name, but without the wealth or power that should have come with it. From the very beginning, Caesar lived with a gap between who he was supposed to be and what he actually had. And that gap became the engine of his ambition. One story from his youth tells you everything about the man he would become. While still young, Caesar was captured by pirates and held for ransom. When the pirates demanded a certain sum for his release, Caesar was insulted, not by the kidnapping, but by the price. He told them they clearly had no idea who they had captured, and demanded they raise the ransom on themselves. For weeks, as a prisoner, he behaved not like a captive but like a leader. He joked with the pirates, ordered them around, and calmly promised that once he was free, he would return and have them all crucified. They laughed. They thought it was a joke. It was not. The moment his ransom was paid, Caesar raised a fleet, hunted the pirates down, and did exactly what he had promised. Even as a powerless prisoner, he carried himself as if he were already in command. And that is the first secret of his psychology. He understood that power begins as a performance, that if you act like you belong above other men, the world slowly begins to believe it. Back in Rome, Caesar set out to climb the brutal ladder of Roman politics. But he had a problem. Power in Rome cost money, staggering amounts of it, and Caesar's family didn't have it. So he did something that should have destroyed him. He borrowed. Enormously. He went so deep into debt that it said he owed fortunes he could never realistically repay. And then he spent every coin of it on the public. He staged spectacular games, gladiator contests grander than Rome had ever seen, lavish feasts, public entertainments, generous gifts to the people. To anyone watching, Caesar looked like one of the wealthiest, most generous men in the city. In reality, he was almost bankrupt. He survived only because the richest man in Rome agreed to back his debts, betting that this ambitious young politician was worth the investment. And here is the dark genius of it. Caesar understood that people don't follow your bank account. They follow what they perceive. The crowds didn't see his debt. They saw a powerful man showering them with gifts. And perceived power, used skillfully, attracts the real thing. He spent money he didn't have to buy an image, and that image bought him the loyalty of Rome. This is the first principle. The appearance of power often comes before the reality. Look strong, act generous, control the image, and people will hand you the very power you're only pretending to have. Caesar then made a strategic choice that defined his entire career. Roman politics was split between two great forces: the old aristocrats, who guarded their privileges jealously, and the common people, who had the numbers but little voice. Most ambitious nobles sided with the aristocrats, where the prestige was. Caesar did the opposite. He made himself the champion of the ordinary people. He pushed for laws that helped the poor. He positioned himself, again and again, as the one powerful man who actually cared about the common Roman. And in return, the people gave him something the aristocrats could never match: raw, overwhelming popular support. This was the second principle of his power. The elites had money and tradition, but Caesar had the crowd. And a leader backed by an adoring public is incredibly difficult to attack, because moving against him means moving against the people themselves. His rivals in the Senate watched his popularity grow with rising alarm. They could see what he was building, but every time they tried to block him, they risked enraging the very mob that loved him. Caesar had turned the affection of ordinary people into a shield and a weapon. To rise even higher, Caesar needed something the games and the crowds could not give him: military glory. So he took command of Rome's legions and marched north, into the vast, untamed lands of Gaul. Over several brutal years, he conquered it all. It was a staggering military achievement that made him fabulously wealthy and gave him a battle-hardened army personally loyal to him alone. But Caesar did something with that conquest that was, in its own way, even more brilliant than the fighting. He wrote about it. He composed detailed accounts of his own campaigns, and he wrote them in the third person, describing the heroic deeds of Caesar as if reported by a neutral observer. These accounts were sent back to Rome and read widely. To the Roman public, it felt like objective news of their great general's triumphs. In reality, it was carefully crafted self-promotion, written by the very man it glorified. This is the third principle, and one of the most powerful of all. Control your own story. Caesar understood that if you let others define you, you are at their mercy. But if you write the narrative yourself, and make people believe it's the simple truth, you can shape exactly how history sees you. He didn't just win battles. He controlled what those battles meant. But Caesar's growing power terrified his enemies in Rome. They ordered him to give up his army and return as a private citizen, which would have left him defenseless, ready to be destroyed by his rivals. Caesar faced an impossible choice: obey and likely be ruined, or refuse and commit an unforgivable crime. Roman law was absolute. No general could bring his army into Italy itself. To cross the small river that marked the border, the Rubicon, at the head of his legions, meant open war against his own state. He stood at that river and understood that everything hung on the next moment. And then he crossed. He is said to have spoken a single phrase as he did, that the die was now cast. There was no turning back. With that one decision, he plunged Rome into civil war. And this reveals a darker truth about power. There comes a point where caution becomes its own kind of death, where the only path forward is total commitment. Caesar's enemies expected him to hesitate, to play it safe. Instead, he gambled everything on a single irreversible move. His boldness shattered their plans, because they had never truly believed he would dare. Caesar won the civil war, and what he did next surprised everyone. In Rome's recent past, victorious leaders had slaughtered their defeated enemies, hunting them down, seizing their property, drowning the city in blood to eliminate any future threat. Everyone expected Caesar to do the same. He didn't. Instead, he became famous for his clemency. He pardoned many of the men who had fought against him. He let former enemies keep their lives, their wealth, even their positions. He presented himself not as a vengeful conqueror, but as a merciful one. This looked like kindness, but it was also one of his sharpest psychological moves. By sparing his enemies, Caesar made himself look noble and generous, winning enormous admiration. And he placed his rivals in a strange kind of debt. They now owed their very lives to the man they had tried to destroy. How do you rise up against someone who chose to spare you? Mercy disarmed them more completely than execution ever could. This is the fourth principle. Forgiveness, used deliberately, is a tool of power. It makes you appear great, and it binds your enemies with gratitude and obligation. But Caesar's mercy carried a hidden flaw, a flaw that would, in the end, cost him everything. Because some of the men he generously spared never forgave him for needing to be forgiven. With his enemies defeated or pardoned, Caesar stood alone at the summit of the Roman world. And here, at the very peak, his psychology turned against him. He was named dictator, first temporarily, then, eventually, for life. He gathered honors and titles upon himself like no Roman ever had. His face appeared on coins. He sat in a gilded chair. He was treated less like a public official and more like a king. And that word, king, was the deadliest word in Rome. Centuries earlier, the Romans had overthrown their kings and built a republic precisely so that no single man could ever rule them again. The fear of a king was woven into the very soul of the city. Caesar seemed not to feel the danger. Whether or not he truly wanted a crown, he allowed himself to look like a man who did. He grew more confident, more dismissive of the old traditions, more certain that no one would dare touch him. He had climbed so high, achieved so much, that he began to believe he was beyond the reach of ordinary men. This is the fifth principle, and the most dangerous one of all. Success breeds blindness. The higher you rise, the more you start to believe in your own invincibility. And it is exactly in that moment of supreme confidence, when you stop watching the people closest to you, that you become most vulnerable. A group of senators began to plot in secret. They told themselves they were patriots, saving the republic from a man who would be king. Many of them were Caesar's own colleagues, and among them was Brutus, a man Caesar had pardoned, trusted, and treated almost like a son. On a day in mid-March, Caesar went to the Senate. He had been warned. There were omens, rumors, a note pressed into his hand that he never read. People had begged him to stay away, or to bring a bodyguard. But Caesar, certain of his own untouchability, dismissed them all. He walked in surrounded by the very men plotting his death. They crowded around him. And then they struck, again and again, dozens of blows, a storm of daggers from the men he had ruled, fought beside, and forgiven. The ancient sources say that when Caesar saw Brutus among his attackers, Brutus, of all people, he stopped resisting. He may have spoken a few final words of disbelief to the young man he had spared. Then he pulled his robe over his face and fell. The most powerful man in the world, killed not by a foreign army, not by a rival general, but by the trusted men standing closest to him. The shield of mercy he had built became the hand that struck him down. So what does Julius Caesar really teach us? That power is, above all, psychological. He understood that perception comes before reality, that if you look powerful, control your own story, and win the hearts of the crowd, real power will follow. He used debt to project strength, conquest to build a legend, and mercy to disarm his enemies. In almost every move, he was playing a game inside other people's minds. But his death carries the darkest lesson of all. The very things that lifted him to the top contained the seeds of his fall. His confidence became blindness. His mercy spared the men who killed him. And his belief that he was untouchable left him defenseless at the exact moment he was most exposed. The uncomfortable question Caesar leaves us with is this: when you finally reach the height of your power, when you feel most secure, most certain, most untouchable, is that the moment of your greatest strength? Or the precise moment you stop seeing the danger standing right beside you? If this changed the way you see power, subscribe. Because here, we don't study history to escape the past. We study it to understand the forces that move people, even today. And to see the man who studied rulers like Caesar to write the ultimate handbook on power, watch our video on Machiavelli next.